This is Andy Tube, and I'm still doing the dismantling of the Singer Model 503A, because I'm going to, restore it and really clean it up good. So the next step for me is to remove this needle bar vibrating bracket, and that's since this machine has a zigzag, the needle has to be able to swing back and forth to make the zigzag, and that's what the vibrating bracket does. And what makes the vibrating bracket vibrate is a driving arm, and this is the driving arm right there. And as you have a cam on here and you move into the zigzag position, it's got some little levers and stuff that make the driving arm drive back and forth, to make that what I call a swing needle. And while I'm up here, there's a spring I have to take off the front, and while I'm up here, let me show you this is the other end of that spring, and it's just hooked onto a little tension arm right here. And when you take it off in the front, this is it's very easy for this to pop off. So I wanted you to be aware of where that is, right there. Not sure how well you can see that, where that spring is going. That might give you a better view. So also, while I am up here, and let me take the pointer out of my mouth. This is a large eccentric hinge pin that goes right down into this vibrating back bracket, and we're going to have to remove that. And what you want to do before you remove it is mark where the screw slot is on the body of the machine. So you can mark one end of the slot and then mark the body with like a Sharpie or something, but since I degrease everything and polish stuff, sometimes that has washed off during the process. So what I do is I come in here with a little chisel or screwdriver or metal file and make a nick in the aluminum body. And then on this so I've got a little, you might be able to see it, a little nick in the aluminum, and then I take a file to this end of the screw slot, and I cut a little groove in it with a file, just enough so that I know which side I'm looking at here. And that's important to do, so mark it somehow so that after you take it out, when you go to reassemble, you'll know which end of the slot to line up with your mark on the aluminum body. Okay, so I showed you that stuff up top. I'll show you what else I do. Maybe is sometimes I'll take a rubber band and I'll put it around that driving arm, and the top of the pattern selector just to kind of hold that in place. All that stuff there. Okay, so now let's get back to the needle bar vibrating bracket. And the first thing that we want to do is unhook the spring from the small hinge pin. So up here is the big hinge pin. This is the little hinge pin, or the small one. And the spring comes from the right side, wraps around the front, and goes past it here about 5/8 or 3/4 of an inch. So we've got to unhook that pin and get that out of there. And it's a fairly tight fit up here. Sometimes I can go in like this from behind and get back on that spring far enough to pull it and forward a little bit and get it off of that hinge pin. And you don't want to force anything and bend the spring, which I almost did there. Being a little stubborn here. There. Woohoo. Okay. So is that showing up at all there? Can you see that kind of fish hook end of the spring coming out? There's inches of it that are just straight and not coiled at this end. So just gently release that back in there. Oh, yeah, sure enough, it popped right off of that tension arm. So I'm just going to pull it out because I don't want it getting in there and getting in a gear or a lever or something and getting damaged. So this long straight end with the hook is what is in the front, and the coiled end with the other hook that goes on the tension arm, that's inside the machine. Okay, so there's our first little removal of the part. So let me set up here and then we'll continue. Okay, so the next step now is to remove the small hinge pin. We took the spring off of it, and this hinge pin goes up through the end of the driving arm and connects to the vibrating bracket, and that pin goes through both those parts to hold them together. So we want to remove that hinge pin, and there is a set screw up here that we have to loosen up or remove, and then we want to remove the hinge pin, and it can be quite stubborn. Oh yeah, so my use of penetrating oil for a couple hours really helped that. You don't want to bend this pin. If you have to grab it with pliers or something, be real careful because you don't want to bend it. It's a pretty sturdy, solid stainless steel pin, you know, or chromed pin, or anyway. Ooh, look at all the varnished oil in there. Yeah, almost looks like a rusty spot, but anyway, we'll take that out. I'm just going to turn that set screw back in a couple turns so I don't lose it. Now, here is a set screw and a collar, and that goes on the end of the large hinge pin to hold the bracket, support the bracket so it doesn't fall off the hinge pin, right? The small hinge pin is held in place by its set screw. Now the bracket is held to the large hinge pin by a collar, and the collar is held on with a set screw. So, this way it won't block you. Let's see. I'll come here and I will loosen or remove. Oh, that was easy. I just loosened it and the collar started spinning. So here's what that collar looks like. It's got a nice screw that holds it. So we're making very good progress here now. Whoop. Yeah. Now we can't just pull the bracket off because it's connected. It goes like a puzzle piece to the end of the driving arm. So we can't pull it out because we've got the hinge pin in it, and the kind of mated up to the driving arm. So that's why we have to remove the large hinge pin. And please be sure you got your screw slot and the body marked up here like I talked about. Okay? If you're skipping around in the video and just found this, you need to mark where the screw slot lines up with the body. And I file a little groove in the aluminum and a little groove on this side of the hinge pin slot so I know where to put it back. So you mark it how you want, but be sure and do that before you take these next steps, okay? And got to get a different bit now. By the way, I lost one of my little bits for my screwdriver. I can't find it anywhere, so if you see it, let me know, okay? We'll come up right here and we're going to back out this hinge pin screw right there. Okay, so that screw holds. This is a excuse me. This is like a split clamp right here. So when it's tight, it squeezes it enough together. So we back that off to loosen it. And then we want to take, oh, there we go. Then we want to push up on the end of the hinge pin here. Now hold on to your vibrating bracket and work this hinge pin out. Okay, and that is a pretty big hinge pin for a Singer domestic machine, and it's eccentric, and that's why you have to mark it so that you put it back in the same place and you'll be able to get your swing needle or vibrating bracket swinging back and forth. Okay, now up at the top here, remember I showed you that driving arm next to the spring? Okay, look, I'll show it to you again. Remember I said that I put that rubber band around there so none of this would move. You kind of hold on to that, and normally you would pull out your vibrating bracket, but when I turned it, look, it just fell out. So that's where, right in here, see, that matches up with these two kind of fingers coming off the driving arm, and that's where the little hinge pin goes. right there, and this is where the big hinge pin goes. So once you pull out that big hinge pin, there won't be, it just will kind of be like that. Yeah. So you pull out that big hinge pin, and I would go up and hold that driving arm so it doesn't come loose from the pattern selector, and then pull out the vibrating bracket. Now I can give it a nice clean and inspection, make sure it's not cracked anywhere where that hinge pin goes, all that rusty varnish and stuff. See, I can clean all these parts up really good now. Yay. So that was easy, right? You've probably been following along and you're all done. So let's talk about putting it all back together now. And if you send $9.95 to my PayPal, I'll give you a link that shows you how to put it back together. Hey, that's just a joke. Come on. No, let me get everything ready here, and we will put that vibrating bracket assembly all back together the proper way. Okay. Okay, I think this is set up good to show you how we're going to put this needle bar vibrating bracket back together. And we're going to start with putting it kind of on the between the arms of the needle bar driving arm. I'll get it kind of lined up, because once we put that large hinge pin in there, we can't move the bracket around very much. So we'll just stick it in there between the top and the bottom arm of the needle bar driving arm, and then we're going to take our large hinge pin and drop it in the top up here. You can get that like that. And I just need to double check my filing mark when I drop it in, so that I can I think I talked about this, the screw slot, the screwdriver slot, I marked one end, and I made my little groove in the aluminum housing so that I can line those two marks up, so the concentric hinge pin will be in the right position. And I'll just get it in here and maneuver it into the vibrating bracket, hopefully. Come on, you. See, I didn't clean this up yet or anything, because I just wanted to show you how to... Oh, I think I had it too low. So once I raised it up closer to the hinge pin, then it went in better. Let's see. Okay. Ooh, there we go. So hinge pin down and bracket up, right? And then I'm going to line up my two markings up here, and I think I kind of put that one in the wrong end. So let me turn that around here and take a closer look. No, I had it right after all. When I got closer and looked at it, I can see my filing groove up here, and I'll line it up with the groove I made, or the mark I made on the aluminum body. Yep. Okay. Then once I have them lined up, you know, push down on the hinge pin from the top and push up on the bracket to make sure it's seated well, and then I'm going to tighten the screw that holds that hinge pin in place. And I'm going to do it pretty firmly because this is going to be swinging all the time when you sew zigzag, so you don't want that hinge pin working loose or riding up. Okay, that looked pretty good. So I think I want to put in my, see, they say to put the collar back on the bottom here, but I'm thinking more that I want to put the little the little hinge pin back in, and I might want to be able to wiggle this around up and down a little bit to help me get that back in there. So I'll push my driving arm against the vibrating bracket here. Get it in position, yeah. And let me get my other little, a smaller tip on the screwdriver here, because I probably tighten that set screw back up a little bit so I wouldn't lose it, and I don't want it to block me now while I'm putting in the hinge pin. So the hinge pin, you can see this groove cut in here that holds the spring. So of course that's going to go on the bottom because the spring goes on the bottom. So we'll start with trying to put that other end back up in place. So it's got to go through two arms of the driving arm, and well, everything seems too tight here now. What happened? Everything seems a little bit too tight. I better check this before I proceed here. See, this should kind of swing back and forth here, and it's real kind of oh, it's slipping down. That must be why they tell you to put the collar on first, huh? Okay, let's put the collar on first then. So I'll put the collar, and I'll push up on it. Now before, the screw was way over to the left side, but this time I'm just going to have it out in the center so I can get my fingers over here on the left to put that hinge pin back in. Matter of fact, I'm going to temporarily put the screw on the collar over here to the right. Okay. Because I know it's a tight fit to get in there with this smaller hinge pin and try and line up the driving arm and the vibrating bracket and everything, and get it through all 4 of the pieces. Let's get it started here. Let's see, maybe if I turn this, I turn it like that, come from this side, you'll be able to see it, and I'll be able to see it. Okay, I got it up in the first part of the driving arm. Is there enough light on this? Wiggle that around, get it up in the next part here. Up, whoa, there we go. And I think it's all the way in because I can now see the top of that small hinge pin sticking up above the top little arm of the needle bar driving arm. So I think I've got that at the right height, all the way up there. Let's check and see if it's still kind of swinging here. Yep. So now I want to tighten the set screw here that holds that small pin in. So just push on the pin to be sure it's up in there all the way, and tighten. There we go. Now I have to go back on the collar a little bit because I put it way over here and I've got it up too tight. So let me just loosen it a little bit, and oh shoot, I loosened it too much, huh? Alright, let's put it back on there. I know my hinge pin is all the way down in there because I tightened the screw on it real good. So let me just snug this a little bit, and I want it around here on the left side. And the thing is with this, if I push it up all the way and tighten it, let me do that, push it up all the way and tighten it there. Okay, so I turn the set screw here and push the collar up and tighten it. It's kind of binding the bracket as the bracket's trying to swing. Okay, so you don't want the collar pushed up so tight that it binds it. Yeah, so you got to fiddle around. I got to loosen it back up here. Now, if I tightened it here, it would be too loose, and then look, the whole thing can move up and down the bracket. You don't want that. So you just want to gently push it up against the bracket so the bracket cannot move up and down. Hold it there. Hold it there and try that. Tighten it up there. Now let's try and move the bracket up and down. No, there's no end play. There's no bouncing up and down of the bracket. So that's good. And let's see if it'll move freely. Oh, it's still, doggone it, it's still binding a little when it goes to the very back. See, up here it's good. But once I get about halfway into the swing, and look, it'll, see, it's kind of get stuck there. So I'm going to have to work on that a little bit more here. Try it again. I got it pushed up. I have the black collar pushed up against the bracket a little too much. Let me drop it down just a smidge and try that. Nope. Alright, tricky little thing, isn't it? Okay, now look, it's way down here, see? And I have end play on that. That's not good. But look how easy that, see? Yeah, that's what I want, but I got to raise the collar up so that I don't get end play on that bracket. I don't want that bracket in the driving arm when I'm doing zigzag. It'll be bouncing all over the place. There we go. Okay. Hey. That's what we want. So this has to be able to swing freely. The collar cannot be pushed up and bind against the bracket. But it's got to be tight enough that the bracket doesn't float up and down. So we did it. Now, what's all that's left for this is the hinge pin spring. And remember, it's got the long straight end and then the shorter coiled end. And before, when we unhooked it from the front and took it in and it kind of fell off the back, I think this time I'm going to try sticking it from the back out here and hooking this end first. Oh, look how easy was that. See? And then I'm going to try hooking the, see if I can, how can I do this so that you can see? Maybe I can set the spring in there for a minute. So I'm thinking it's going to be easier to put the spring in from the, hook the front and then try and hook it on that tension arm back here, because I think I have a little more room up here. Can I go up anymore? Seems like we've been to this before, deja vu. Huh? Okay, so here's the tension arm that's behind the paddle, and on this side is the little kind of finger that comes out that the other end of that spring hooks on. So I'm thinking if I grab the top of that, kind of the fish hook of the spring here, right near the coil, and grab a hold of it here. So you see I've got that now. So I'm just going to grab it just in front of the coil here, and then I'm going to go put it over that finger on the tension arm. Oh, that worked good. I think next time I go to take it off, I'll just unhook it up at the tension arm and pop it off the front. That worked a lot better than, when I took it off, coming down in here and pulling that spring off from here. It worked. There's a lot more room to work with up here. See? So I think next time I would just unhook this end from the tension arm and then just slide it off in the front. Let's take my rubber band retainer off here and let's see if we've got some swing here. Real nice, yeah, full movement. Okay, look at that. So that's a successful replacement or reinstallation of the needle bar vibrating brackets on the Singer model 503A. On the 500, I didn't mention the 500 because up here with all those crazy knobs on the front, there's one extra little step up here to do. So you may notice it yourself. I'm not going to walk you through it, but you can, I've told you how to download the service guide for the 500 and 503A from Sewing Dude blog on his free download page, and then it'll have the extra step that's needed on the 500. You might be able to figure it out yourself now that you see how that paddle works with one tension arm behind it and one tension arm in the front, right? So there's tension on both sides of that paddle. Oh, I'm real happy with that. That works great. Okay, there you go. Don't forget to mark the large eccentric hinge up here, okay, before you remove it, so that you know right where to set it when you put it back. Thanks for watching AndyTube. I hope you'll come back and see me, and you're welcome to leave a comment, question, subscribe, whatsoever. Take care.